This is what you mean, right?
This is episode 7
Episode 7?
of the Daly Joe broadcast.
Ribbit. Nice.
Right? And this is a show where, well, on a lot of issues, we're just two idiots. We don't really know what's going on, but we're trying to figure it out right with you.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes we're out on the streets figuring it out. Sometimes we're on our laptops scrolling through Facebook and Romantic
right.
Today.
We're just scratching
what
at the surface.
is going on here?
Well, we'll scratch at the surface and we'll say what we think and what we know. And if you got a better idea, we're more than happy to hear your take.
We would love that. And we're, assuming that's pretty likely that you do have a better idea. So please feel free to share that. We're just here to speak our minds, to let you know that, you can't do worse than that. So,
but I think
come
our
on
intentions
out.
are good, even though the path to hell is paved with them.
Yeah, right, exactly.
We want Wyndham and Willimantic to be a better place to live, and for us and for our kids and for the next generation. So we're looking at the issues. We're looking at anything here.
That's right. It's really important to state that as well. And so before we get into those issues, Joe, who are you? Can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Well, I think that changes as of Election Day on Tuesday. I ran for town council out in the Wyndhams.
The crowd just went wild.
They are. I can hear my mother-in-law cheering for me. So there are 2 seats out in the Wyndhams on the town council. There are 4 seats in Willimantic, 4 at large in the mayor. So we have a big crowd on the town council. And
absolutely.
I have a ton to learn. I learned a lot just in the last 2 months. I have a list of 33 things and counting that people have told me about that I said, I need to learn more about.
Look at that. This guy's been elected for 1 day, and he's already got a list of 33 things that he's got from constituents and voters in the Wyndhams there that you're going to start working on.
Yep, we get sworn in on November 21st, so that's when the job officially starts.
Okay, but you're putting in the legwork now so that when you have the power to create and make change, it'll be in the right direction.
We'll see what that power does, but hopefully we can get some cohesion on that group and focus and make some reasonable priorities. But
I think so.
We'll see how that goes.
So. I think you're a pretty well-rounded individual, Democrat, Republican, Green, whatever party it might be. It's really about the people and
thank you for saying that.
They need.
I really appreciate contrary perspective. So I think people are worried about Democratic sweep, and of course you see the snarky comments on Facebook. I want to know what other people from other parties think. I'm sure they have a lot of good ideas. I bet we have a lot in common.
Yeah, right.
And I have a lot to learn from, say, Tony Pantoli, who's on there as a Republican, and even the candidates who didn't make it. They're still citizen volunteers that have lots of ideas. And
absolutely.
I want to take that in and be able to articulate things that work.
And in case you listeners haven't figured it out yet, our first topic is the election. But before we get into that, Joe...
Oh, yeah. We got to do the journey.
Who am I?
Oh, yeah. I forgot about you.
Who am I sitting here?
I get
being loud.
Town council. I'm a big head. I forget all about
the little guy.
All about me.
The little guy over here. Yeah.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Steve Daly. I'm a local real estate agent, born and raised in Willimantic. Love living here. Love being a part of the town. I'm on a bit of a journey myself, not through politics, but just through business connections and neighborly connections and community helping. So any way that I can, I'm usually there. That's a little bit about me.
I hope you can find my mother-in-law a place.
Oh, yeah. I'm working with Lorraine right now. Actually, I have a solid lead.
Nice. We'll talk after the show.
Yes, absolutely.
So, yeah, you're everybody that works with you loves to work with you. Being a realtor dovetails nicely with your love of this town. So It's not just a job. You want to see strong streets
Yeah, I mean, it makes it easy when I'm looking at properties with people, talking about how great this town is, because I do genuinely love it, and I think that comes through.
Yeah, I also like the way you think about the selling process in a very holistic way. I mean, there's a lot that goes on to feeling right about changing from one place to the other. So without making an infomercial, I know in the past, maybe we should talk about that.
We could have a whole real estate episode or show.
Because I think you bring a lot to it that I hadn't heard from other realtors. So it's a pleasure to work with you both for my mother-in-law, but also knowing that you bring all your skills and your heart into it.
It beats for you, Joe,
All
and
right.
your mother-in-law,
and anybody else out there that wants to live in this town.
Absolutely. But that's enough about me. Our first topic is the election, which was right back what we already started talking about. And as Joe was saying, there was kind of a Democratic sweep,
It was a sweep
through the town. Which is interesting. I think, when you look at the national level on politics, on how people vote or what they hear in the media, that all comes into play. And it has some effect on the local level. And who knows? Some people say it's whether or not you actually know those people. Sometimes it's someone that doesn't know who to vote for. They pick, I'm used to voting for Democrats, so I'm going to do that. Or I'm used to voting Republican, I'm doing for that. But I like your take that it really comes down to the individual when it is this kind of small town politics on really what makes a difference. It's not the party as much, even though we did have the Democratic sweep, but the individual makes the biggest impact.
All right, so let's flip this around a little bit. And what do you think is potentially the worst thing about a Democratic sweep?
Potentially the worst thing about a Democratic sweep? That's a really loaded question.
Well, I'm trying to provoke you.
There could be, I'll
answer that question too.
Yeah, I'd say for me, it's kind of what I just said, is that, anyone that wants to get elected in Willimantic could just put their name on the ballot as a Democrat and likely win, right? It doesn't seem, and I could be totally wrong. Maybe all these people are, like, everyone that voted for everyone knows them or knows their policies and their politics, or they're just doing the party line, which is a way to do it. You know kind of what to expect with the Democratic Party versus Republican, but I guess that's my point is, and the worst thing would be, at the little town level, that's not necessarily true, right? It is more about the individual. Like you're a Democrat, but through our discussions, I wouldn't say that everything that you propose is a hardline Democratic Party policy.
Yeah, I'll concur with you on a couple things. One is, the statement that you said that, the Democratic Party is so strong in this town that, they really could put anybody up, and there are so many voters that are just going to vote right across the line.
Right.
So they don't really have to know what they're buying.
Right.
I think
the packaging looks great to a lot of people, they're in.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think a lot of people are lifelong Democrats, and they're going to vote that, and that's a huge electoral advantage. Does it guarantee that we get, the best people in the job? Not necessarily.
Right.
But so what it does mean is that the Democratic Town Committee, which selects and endorses candidates, has a disproportionate amount of power because they know they have that sort of support.
Right.
So, I think it's not a bad idea if people are interested in politics to really consider about being a member of the Democratic Town Committee. I think I think we have about half the active membership that we should have.
Interesting.
And I think that's a very big tent. And I say that because I have not been given any litmus tests on, nobody's asked me, hey, what are your policies? They haven't.
Right.
That's
you just said, hey, I want to run.
They kind of know me because they've seen me on different committees and whatnot. They have this general sense of my sensibilities, but there hasn't been a grilling. and an evaluation, like
Well,
that.
another way to look at it, because you're talking about like your intellect or your policies and all that, and I was talking about, you might not get the best person in there because you just run Democrat. You could flip that on its head and say, well, the smartest people are going to know this, and they'll just run Democrat. They'll take anyone in there, and as long as you
I think if somebody
show up and do that, then bam, you're in. So maybe those are the people you want because they had that strategy, and it wasn't necessarily that party holds their values and their policies, but hey, if I want to get elected and get things done, I'm going to run Democrat.
And I think because it's like everything in this small town, a few people can really shape things. I think of somebody like Susan Hunter,
she's awesome.
I love Susan Hunter. She didn't get elected.
Right.
She ran in the Green Party. I think if she ran as a Democrat, she could have probably,
double the votes.
She would easily.
Absolutely.
She would probably be serving somewhere, and she could still pursue her points of view and her perspectives. I don't.
Yeah.
This is...
No, that's reality, right?
This is the reality of it. It's the local politics is not... it's not a mirror image of national politics, and I think that's one thing that people get confused. It's
right.
This is the blue team with their friends, and yes, they do kind of in mass probably tend to reflect what happens in Washington, but there is I lived across the street from Andy Carey. Andy Carey could easily be a Republican from the 70s and 80s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was very conservative, and there are a lot of things that I agree about.
But for people that don't know, he was a big-time Democrat.
He was a big-time
Democrat,
yeah. So I think the moral of the story is the Democratic Party here is very organized. They support each other. I was a new candidate. I had 40 people out there putting up signs for me, knocking on doors, passing out literature. So that makes a big difference in a town where you have 11,000 registered voters and 15% of them will vote.
Right. So is the answer then, instead of running Republican or Green, like, hey, everyone, let's all just run the Democratic Party, and then it's going to go against...
I think that's a reasonable...
the cream will rise to the top through there.
I think it's a reasonable thing to investigate. Yeah.
Interesting. And another point we were talking about before we started recording was election results. Those were finally shared by the Chronicle 24 hours after. But as far as what I saw, there's nothing on the town website. Maybe there is at this point, but last time I checked, there wasn't. And also, the only place I saw online that was posting results was the Democrats. So having an organized front to share information about the election, that's important. But man, even before the election, if I wasn't friends on Facebook with any of these candidates, I wasn't going to find anything.
So many people were wondering, where do you find results, for crying out loud?
Yeah.
It's embarrassing, really.
Yeah.
Why is it so damn hard to find who won?
I don't know.
Who do you have to know?
That's why you're on there now to investigate this.
I think it kind of reinforces this idea. Like, who do you have to know to get basic information? And that speaks to the lack of transparency. The lack of transparency corrodes trust. In my mind, the main page of the town website should have just had the state results posted. It's like, here's a link to the Connecticut state. It's got everybody all across the state, go to Wyndham for results. That should have been up there even before the election so everybody knew about it.
Huh. Yeah.
I didn't think of that until I saw the confusion after.
Right.
But I made a note. It's on my list.
There you go. Thank you, Joe. Making positive change already. And pre-election, having a common place where people can go learn about the candidates, I think, would help, especially the disparity of the party line voting. That
was another thing. I tried to share some Vote 1-1, which is the League of Women Voters site, to put up that. But the Willimantic Today admins blocked it. They didn't want me saying anything about it. It's like, we'll share election information.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of heavy-handed.
Willimantic Today is such a great spot to get information about what's going on in the community. I find that's what I use it for.
It's the frankly. Best.
And it is like, it's a privately run group, so it makes sense. Like, hey, they can have that rule. At the same time, it's in this day and age of social media and connectiveness, maybe there should be a town group, and maybe there is that I just am ignorant of, that this stuff like should be shared on.
Yeah, I think the social media strategy for the town is non-existent. Okay, if there is a Facebook site, it probably has some, token like event being broadcast, but it's not a strategy would be like, how do we get every Facebook user in town on the town Facebook site? Like that should be the strategy, that everybody's connected, and we have.
I guess the way to do it would be to have valuable and relevant posts from that site that they share in the Willimantic Today site that drives people over there. And then when it's politics season, they can post whatever they want on their town page, where people are now getting in their feed, or at least a link to it to say, hey, no politics on this page, but check this out to learn about the candidates here.
My guess is the town is afraid to get into that whole hornet's nest of like what who you cut off and what's the legal repercussions of a municipal agency cutting out, like what
that makes sense.
How do you do all that? But I think it's doable, and in the absence of that,
they could at least fine. Don't put it on social. Put it on their website, but at least link through somewhere where most people are. And I know a lot of people say, hey, don't complain on Willimantic Today about this, that, or the other. But the fact of the matter is, that's kind of our town crier, pulpit there. where stuff
I think
is shared.
We shouldn't be afraid.
For better or worse.
We shouldn't be afraid of all those curmudgeons and the people crying. And they're pretty vicious and nasty. But what's really important is to separate the issue from the presentation of the issue. Because when I look at Willimantic Today and I see, these like sort of stomach churning critiques of people, and it gets personal and nasty. But if you dig underneath that, okay, there is an issue there that deserves attention. Sure. There's a reason why people are so pissed off and discouraged.
Yeah.
Like that's more important than
there's some nice things that are shared on there too. Just so we know, there's lots of rays of sunshines and rainbows, and I appreciate all of you for sharing those things too.
Well, I try to put some positives out there and talk about different businesses that are I'm appreciative. But
sorry, I just had to throw that in there. I've got to look on the bright side of most things here.
Yeah, but the point was like why not have it like a town site, and then you have to the thing is you have to deal with the dark side. Of commentary, and no one's willing to tackle that yet. But I think that would go a long way to improving transparency. And
I agree. But again, to your point, I don't know the legal side of that. I don't know if they're allowed to take down people's close off commenting on things. The way that Willimantic Today is run, I believe it's come a long way, and it seems pretty fair at this point. Where it's limiting too much overreach of negative thought and discussion, while still allowing the issues to be shared there.
People could take their clothes off and post on the town website. Can we take that down? I don't know.
Right, freedom of speech. Here's my dick.
This is where I feel like we're.
Oh God! All right,
we're into the two idiots.
Realm. Yeah. Just in case you forgot,
we've managed to reach that point where this is where we are.
Yeah.
This is as far as we know.
You ready for the next topic?
Yeah.
Let's move on.
What else can we stumble into?
Oh boy. I think we only have time for one of these. Okay. Actually.
What are the two?
You want to jump this one? Yeah. Fair Rent Commission.
Yeah, that's going to be a hot one.
Hot topic, hot take. Yeah. Let's see what we got.
What's your impression of, when you hear Fair Rent Commission, or what do you know about it? Reveal your idiocy on this.
Yeah. So first of all, as a real estate agent, I really do focus on sales, right? So buying and selling, and certainly that part of it is like, wow, things have gotten a lot more expensive, a lot harder to buy. The supply is really low, demand is really up, and when that happens in the buying sector, that has a ripple effect into the renting sector as well. in the same exact way. So demand is really high, supply is really low. As far as getting the government involved to do fair rent commissions and take kind of the free market out of it, it's such a loaded thing. There's a lot of sides to it. Part of me says yes. I mean, who can afford that rent? And if people can't afford the rent, where are they going to go? Hopefully there's another place that's cheaper and still can feel like home. And okay, now we're kicking people out of our town to go somewhere else. And two, if there's nowhere to go, we're making people homeless, right? And, fair market, the way that the free market should work is, well, then a developer should see that opportunity, which they are, right? Main Street, we are putting these houses or apartments in there, getting more housing for people, and that will balance it out. So that's where, not doing anything and letting the free market take care of it sounds like a fair strategy. The other argument about not having fair rent commission come in and potentially regulate rent increases, right? Is that basically what they're doing? You actually know more about the commission.
I'm going to let you express your ignorance.
Yeah. So this is
then I'll express mine.
Well, yeah, and that's great because this is just what I've heard, right? And so anything I say here, if people know differently, that's great. And we want you to share that, whether it's on a comment or a call. You can call me directly, 860-771-3992, and talk about this. Because that's, again, I'm sharing the idea and my understanding, which may or may not be accurate. But when you do bring in that rent control, and I was talking to some investors in the area, some of them do really well. Some of them own a ton of properties and do really well. And this, they don't want it because it cuts into profits, right? Others have a couple properties, but because inflation's been happening, their prices have gone up as well. So their margins are shrinking as far as profits that they're making or even maintenance funds that they're able to put aside from the rent that they're collecting to take care of these properties, right? And talking to them, they're saying, well, if you start doing that fair rent commission and taking away our margins here, I can't afford to own it anymore, which is like, fine. Okay, they'll sell it and now someone else will buy it. Well, if it's a multifamily home, it's probably, or an apartment complex, right? That's not owned by too many smaller landlords. But anyway, if they're going to be selling that, who has the money and the capital to weather a smaller margin, right? Do you think it's a local person that spends their money in our economy here, is a part of the community, is able to show up at properties or at least send someone to take care of tenants when they do have issues, right? Do you think those are the people that have the type of margins to weather a fair rent commission that's going to cut into that profit? It's not, right? They will have to sell, and those properties are not necessarily going to be owned by local people here that are going to be able to come in and buy them. Like, that's the idea, right? Oh, if a landlord has to sell, that's great. Someone else can have an opportunity. Not if the margins don't make sense for anyone that's not backed by a huge corporation, right? So the argument there is that by having that control, it helps the tenant in the short term, but who's actually going to end up owning that property? Some corporation that doesn't know you, might not care about you. And once they own everything, well, there's no incentive for them to not lobby against Congress to now make those rents go right back up, right? So you're going to get less service and more rent. And the other thing with fair rent commission is because, this is another argument I've heard, because there's kind of a built-in lock on how much rents can increase, landlords are incentivized in that sense to raise it the maximum amount every year. Whereas if it's not that, then it goes with the free market more, and they might not raise it some years. Obviously, recently it's gone way, way up, and that is a problem. I'm not brushing that under the rug. I'm just pointing out that it's, I think, more complicated than just saying rent can only be this much.
Well, those are some really good points. I love hearing the counterpoints. It makes me think that we should be able to look at places that actually have rent control. Now, rent control is much more draconian than having a commission that's looking at isolated cases of exorbitant rent increase. Rent control is like everybody's, in this space, like New York City. So, where we have rent control, do we see depressed housing development? Like a lot of those behaviors that you're talking about, I think would be to the extreme in a rent control environment. And what you're describing sounds a lot like the same kind of behaviors, except maybe not as extreme, because the rent commission won't.
Right. Might it disincentivize people to build new housing projects and apartments if, we're not going to get a return on this investment because we can only charge this much for rent?
Yeah. The other thing that at the beginning of what you were talking about, the market response to rising costs, rising housing pricing and rents, in theory, should be more people will find building profitable.
Yeah.
And
obviously it can't happen fast enough with the rate of increase that we've experienced.
Right, there's got to be a multi-year lag. I
Yeah.
would think it's years to respond to that.
If I can just jump in quickly for one more point and clarify who I am and my perspective personally, I'm not an investor myself. I'm actually very much about each individual owning their own home. Guess what? I'm a real estate agent. But I do believe strongly in the idea that the more that each of us in our community owns, property-wise here, the better off our community is. So my personal perspective is actually in favor of all the tenants being able to save enough money and then buy their own properties. I know that's not always a realistic thing for everyone, but the most people that I can help do that is my personal goal, as well as my business goal. So all of these things I'm saying are just, I want it to be clear that I'm sharing ideas that I've heard from others.
Yeah.
And like you said, I think it's really important to have both sides, because I could go a whole argument on the other side of the issue too, because if people can't save money, they're not going to be able to purchase a home. So some type of fair rent commission or control might be necessary there. So it's a really loaded thing. I also want to just plug my ethical idea about buying single family homes for rent. I don't think it's a great thing for our community. I'm just going to leave that there. I said it publicly.
I mean, there are lots of stories out there about big private equity companies hoovering up all the available single family homes and then renting them out, and this is part of the backdrop. I saw this article that was posted by, I think, was it Eric Westerveld on Wilmette today. It was a professor writing about the impact of the college and the dorms being so expensive that so many of the Eastern students are moving off campus, and so people are snapping up housing stock, and that's another cost.
Right.
So I guess I wonder, like, how a fair rent commission sorts through all that. So when you have like an influx of demand, how do you decide what's a fair increase? Like, are you going to go against, or like, say, well, the market.
Well, I guess it's what I'm learning about this through this discussion with you is the fair rent commission is not rent control.
It's definitely not.
So I think that's a really important thing to put out there, because all the arguments I just said about the other side, most of those are about rent control, having that fixed rate of increase that you can do. Fair rent commission could turn into a policy like that, but correct me if I'm wrong. What I'm understanding is this is a commission to discuss the idea of fair rent and kind of put forth the ideas I'm saying, as well as the other ideas of rent control, and finding where that balance might be.
Yeah, I think the fair rent, I'm thinking this is where I'm getting into idiot zone here. But, like
we're trying to figure it out. I think just like everyone else. No, I don't have all the answers. Go for it, Joe.
If you had, how many landlords do you think there are of properties in this town? I know we're mostly rentals. Like half the properties are rentals, right?
Yeah.
So there has to be a couple hundred. Maybe there's a landlord association. I don't even know if there is a landlord association. But I'd be, if
There are groups.
if a landlord association looked at the
Okay, it's still recording.
if a landlord association, we got to wrap this up. If a landlord association were to look at the rulings of the Fair Rent Commission and say, yeah, we agree with that because that landlord is a greedy bastard. And they're making us all look bad. That one's a slumlord. They deserve what they got. Like if the prevailing sentiment among the landlords was in support of the rulings, in a way, it actually would separate the evil landlords from the people that are actually providing a super important service to people.
People need rentals. Like, let's be clear. Like having but affordable rentals. That's the whole point of having kind of a place to live in a quote unquote temporary situation, right? And some people might rent forever, and that is a fine option as well, as long as there's good, tenant and property owner relationship there.
I just hope a commission can be savvy enough to say, it's like, okay, lumber doubled in price, and a landlord needed to, redo a kitchen.
Yeah.
And they've been keeping their rents down for the last 5 years, and now they got to jump at 40%, or 30%. Like, that's actually, in that situation, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so if the commission gets too rule bound, like, anything more than 5% is bad, then I think you're going to see the behavior that you described, where everyone's like, the Fair Rent Commission, starts, shutting people down when you hit 7%. So we're going to raise it 6% every year.
Yeah.
I could absolutely see something like that.
So it is loaded, but so that's really eye-opening and quite honestly hopeful to me to hear this about Fair Rent Commission. Is just the idea that, hey, we got to sit and talk about this, not necessarily rent control. Here's what it's going to be. Let's see how it plays out.
Maybe this is just an idea. Maybe we can sort of. I'll close my comments on two things. One is maybe the Fair Rent Commission, if it's structured right, is a way of advertising the best practices of our landlords. So
we actually support the landlords.
It's like, hey, we know there are 300 landlords.
By helping them provide good service and rates to their tenants.
85% of them are Gold Star landlords.
We build up our community.
And, here's the 15% that are on the shit list. Okay?
Sure,
and we know who they are.
I think that's pretty fair.
And we're gonna give them a hard time. And we're so grateful for the rest of them. Okay, and that helps all the consumers too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe there's something like that.
Yeah.
I might have a voice in that.
Is this your political mind coming in?
Yes, this is my political mind. And the
other
thing to keep in mind is the state of Connecticut requires every municipality of a population of 25,000 or more to have a Fair Rent Commission. So it's required by law.
We're not quite there.
We're 24,473.
So it's coming regardless.
From the 2020 census, we were just under. So there's a very good chance with our young population that on the next census we'll be over and we'll have to do this.
Okay.
So,
but I think this was awesome to have this discussion. It cleared it up for me about it's Fair Rent Commission, not rent control.
Right.
But that does give an opportunity for both quote unquote sides of this, right? Owners and tenants to have a voice.
Correct.
And that's the most important thing of all.
All right. I think we got to wrap it up here.
I think it is time.
All right, time for our shot.
Have a great day, everyone.
Cheers.
Grab it. The Daily Joe Frogcast. Bye.